Now, you all might have experienced this that whenever you're playing or you are going somewhere or by sudden accident, your skin gets ruptured, and the moment the skin gets ruptured, your blood starts coming out. So that's basically the blood is actually leaking out of the blood vessels. We all know that we all have a closed vascular system or closed circulatory system. Now, that what does mean is the blood is actually transported only within the blood capillaries or the blood vessels, we can say. But during this time of injury, the blood capillaries or the blood vessels are actually damaged, and because of that, the blood comes out. So what we typically do is immediately we put pressure against the place where we are getting the injury, and what we observe after some time, maybe within a minute or so, the blood stops flowing. Now, the reason why the blood stops flowing is because of the blood clotting, also known as the blood coagulation. Right. So, what's happening here? As you can see, this is an electron micrograph. Right. Again, this is with the help of the electron microscope. Right. We have taken this picture. Not we, or the scientists, whoever has done it. So, with the help of electron microscope, they have taken this shot, and you can see these are the mesh-like structure, or these are the network-like structure that actually formed, and these are actually not present at a regular time, but when you are injured, at the site of the injury, these net or mesh-like structures are formed. Entire thing, you can see these all are the structures, and that is holding the blood cells to remain within the body and not go out of the body. So let's see what's actually happening. And we all know that is the platelets which are actually associated. Now, when an injury causes a blood vessels wall to break, the platelets are activated. Now, you can see these are the platelets. So let me just change the color so that we can see, understand better. So these are the platelets, right? Now, these platelets are actually injured, and when they're injured, they actually form basically they become activated, and their regular shape changes from round to a little bit spiny, or they become sticky. Now, what is going to happen is they are going to stick to the broken wall of the vessels, blood vessels, and they're going to stick to each other, and they're going to start to plug. At the same time, they're also going to interact with some other blood protein, which is going to help in the process of formation of the mesh-like structure that you all know about, which I showed you earlier. It's called fibrin, and the fibrin is going to form the network or mesh that is going to trap all the other blood vessels, blood cells, and they're going to form a clot that is going to plug the break. So that's how the blood clotting occurs. Again, we are not going to into details. There are a number of clotting factors and proteins. For example, you have the thrombin, prothrombin, fibrinogen, fibrin. Lots of details are there. We need not go into that. You will learn that in higher class. But it's simple. It is the platelets that gets activated when there's an injury, and after that it is going to change the shape to sticky, spiny, and it is going to stick to each other and along with other blood cells, and it interacts with other blood proteins, which is going to form the fibrin at a later point of time, and the fibrin mesh is going to entrap all the other the cells, and it is going to plug the break of the on the injury site. That is how the blood clotting is going to occur. Now, let's understand about the second very important concept of the component of the human circulatory system, that is going to be blood circulatory system, and that is going to be human heart. So first, let's understand where are they present. As you can see, now they are present in this particular, in the center chest area, well protected within the rib cage, and that slightly inclines toward the left side, and this is the place actually you can see, and on this left side of the lung there is a small place here. Now there's a notch, and this area is called actually let me just write down that it is called cardiac notch. Okay, now it is a cardiac notch which is going to place, or is going to allow this heart to actually stay in there. So that's extra space is provided because of the cardiac notch, which is basically a depression on the left lung. Now again, if you can see, they're all well protected within the rib cage. Otherwise, how are they going to protect from external pressure or the forces? So when we talk about the anatomy, we already have said that they are consisting of two auricles and two ventricles, right? So we have the left and right auricle, and we do have the left and right ventricle. So if you can see here, on the downside, these are called the ventricle, and you can see the left ventricle and the right ventricle, and they are separated by the cardiac septum, right? And the septum is going to be the dividing wall of these two chambers of the heart. Now on the top side, we have the left auricle, or also known as left atrium. Let me write down that is. It is also known as, okay, let me just put that one, left auricle. And this side you have the right atrium, right auricle. Now what you see is there are lots of these pipes going out or coming in basically. So that's the connection to two places. One to the lungs and second to all the other body parts, right? So what you see here, the pulmonary arteries and the pulmonary veins, now these are going to be associated with the lungs, okay? And here the vena cava, which is basically the largest vein, now that is going to associate with the entire circulation, with the entire body, remaining body. And the aorta here is going to be the largest artery. So we'll talk about that, you know, what's actually happening, what is the role of each of these, we'll talk about that. But in general, what you have to understand is there is the superior vena cava and this is called the inferior vena cava. Let me put that here. So it is called the superior vena cava and here it is called the inferior vena cava. Now this superior vena cava is going to bring the blood from all the upper body parts, and the inferior vena cava is going to bring blood from the lower body parts, and they're going to pour into the right auricle. And remember, what we're talking about here is actually, it is the deoxygenated blood. That means the oxygen from here is already been utilized. So that deoxygenated blood is going to be poured into the superior and inferior vena cava into the right auricle, and from there it goes to the right ventricle, and from the right ventricle it is going to go to the pulmonary arteries. Okay, now let's see the left part. Now the left part is consisting of the pulmonary vein, right? And this pulmonary vein brings in the oxygenated blood from the lungs, and it is going to pour the blood to the left auricle, and from the left auricle it is going to go to the left ventricle, and from left ventricle it goes to the aorta, which is nothing but the largest artery, and from here the blood goes to all the body parts. Now I hope you are clear. If you have a little bit of doubt, that also will be clear. Don't worry, within a minute. Now, I have said that the blood is going to go from the auricle, left auricle, to the left ventricle, and there is a particular valve that is called bicuspid valve or the left auricular ventricular valve. Right, a valve is basically going to, let's say, it is going to prevent the backflow of blood. So whenever you talk about the valve, you have to remember that, you know, whatever you're talking about, blood or any other component, they're going to prevent the backflow of that, right? So the bicuspid valve or the left AV valve is going to be present between the left auricle and the left ventricle. Similarly, on the right side you have the tricuspid valve or the right AV valve. Okay, tricuspid or right AV valve. Now on the between the left ventricle and the aorta you have the aortic valve, and between the right ventricle and the pulmonary arteries you have the pulmonary valve. So these are the valves, 4 different valves that are actually present, and they're going to allow the blood to remain in a particular position, and they will not allow the backflow of the blood when there is no pressure exerted from the previous chamber. So that is the role of the pulmonary valve and other components that we are talking about. So let's have a little bit of different look the functions. So they have the right auricle, and right auricle's function is to pump deoxygenated blood to the right ventricle. Right ventricle is going to pump deoxygenated blood into the lungs for oxygenation. So we have to learn about lungs, and we'll talk about how the exchange is going to take place. So then you have the left auricle, and this left auricle is going to pump oxygenated blood to the ventricle, and the left ventricle is going to pump oxygenated blood to different body parts, the aorta, right, to all the body parts. So here you have the involvement of the aorta. So that's the function of the human heart chambers, 4 different chambers. So as you can see here, a slightly better image for your clarity, for your understanding, right? You can see. So here a color is also given so that you understand what's going on. So you have this left auricle opening from the pulmonary vein that is going to bring the oxygenated blood going to the left ventricle, and from there it is going to go to the aorta to all the body parts. Now the pulmonary artery, here you have this inferior and the superior vena cava is opening to the right auricle here, right? And this right auricle, basically the oxygenated blood is going to move to the right ventricle, and from right ventricle it is going to the pulmonary artery, and from pulmonary artery it is going to go to the lungs for deoxygenation. So here from aorta to all the body parts. So as you can see, the blood is entering the heart twice, and there is a separation of the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood in here, and we can find out why there is a separation. So we'll answer this at a later point of time. So you can see here a real image of the human heart, and what you see is actually a dissected human beings, and you can see this this particular part is going to the left lung, and here you see the aorta, this particular part, right? And then here you can see the actually this particular part is the human heart, of course, and here you see the right ventricle. This particular area is going to be the right ventricle, and this particular part is going to be the left, of course, left ventricles, and you can see the superior vena cava in this particular area, and on this side somewhere you are going to have the inferior vena cava. So that's how the heart looks within the body, and that's your heart anatomy, actually dissected person's heart, and that is how it looks. Now there's an anatomical difference between the right and the left ventricle, right? So what happens is here the left ventricle, the thickness, the muscle thickness actually is higher compared to that of the right side. So you can see here right side the thickness is much lesser compared to the left side, and the reason for that is you have to understand that this left side it is going to pump, right? It is going to pump blood throughout the body, and it is going to pump the blood at a higher pressure, and because it needs to pump the blood at a higher pressure, it has to be stronger. The muscle needs to be thicker so that it can pump at high pressure, so that the blood is going to reach each and every part of the body. So the left ventricle is thicker compared to the right, and the right side typically they don't need to pump at a very high pressure, because from the right ventricle it is only going to go to the lungs, and lungs is actually placed slightly nearer to the heart, so that the pressure exerted here is much lesser compared to that of the left ventricle. That is why the muscle anatomically is thicker compared to the right ventricle. We all know that the heart beats around 72 times per minute, right? So what is going to regulate? What is making sure that the heart beats only 72 times and not more, not less? And when we talk about this, we talk about the pacemaker, right? What this pacemaker is actually regulating how many times the heart should beat. And this pacemaker in the heart is going to be the SA node, which is also known as the sinoatrial node, right? This is called the sinoatrial node. Now that's called the pacemaker, and that's going to generate around 70 to 80 electrical impulse per minute, and that electrical impulse is actually going to regulate the number of beats that you're going to have per minute in the heart. So what happens here is the SN node is going to generate the impulse, right? Neural impulse, you can say, or the electrical impulse, and that actually reaches the left auricle also. That is, it is starting with the right auricle, it reaches the left auricle within no time. But when it reaches the AV node, which is placed on this side, now there is a 0.1 second delay, right? It is going to then pass on the information to the ventricles with the help of this, the Purkinje fibers, we can call it, bundle of branches. Then finally, with the help of the Purkinje fibers, here, and here, all this area. Now, once the information reaches the Purkinje fibers, then they can basically contract. So what happens is, it is not that all of four chambers contract at the same time. Rather, it is the auricle that contract, and after a 0.1 second delay also, then the ventricle is going to contract, and that is going to ensure that the blood is going to come in and go out from the heart in a proper manner. So let's now talk about the blood vessels. Now there are three blood vessels which we need to understand about. One is called the arteries, and one is called veins, and the next thing is called the capillary. Now arteries are typically going to carry oxygenated blood under pressure, right? But there is an exception. What is that? Pulmonary artery. Because the pulmonary artery, they carry deoxygenated blood, right? And similarly, the veins carry deoxygenated blood without pressure, except pulmonary vein, because the pulmonary vein, they carry oxygenated blood. Now what's happening, I'll just tell you that in a minute. Once you see the diagram, you'll understand that better. The arteries are going to have a thicker walls compared to that of the veins, right? Veins have not so thick wall, and the capillaries, anyway, they're going to help in the exchange of the materials, right? And they're typically found in the place where there is an exchange of some material going on, and they're typically present between the blood and the cell, whenever the exchange is going on, and they are having typically one layer, one celled wall, right? Their wall is not very much thick, but it is typically one cell. So that is going to help in the process of exchange. Now if you see here, now on this side you have the arteriole, and on this side you have the venule. So if you can understand what's happening, you have the largest artery called the aorta. Now the aorta branch into arteries. Now the arteries further branch into arterioles, right? And the arterioles then form the capillaries along with that of the venules. So here you have the venules. Now the venules is the smallest veins, and then you have the veins, and the largest vein is of course going to be the vena cava. So that is how it is organized. So you can see between the arteriole and venule, whenever there is an exchange of material required, they mix and they form the capillary. So you can see this is the capillary area where the exchange of material can take place. So exchange can occur in these particular places. Now arteries, as you have said, they are typically having a thicker wall compared to that of the veins, and they also lack something the veins only do, and that is present, and that is called the valves, as you know. So why do they have valve? Why do the veins have valve? The answer to that is very simple. Now the artery is going to carry the blood under pressure, and the veins are going to carry the blood under not under pressure. So what happens is, whenever there is no pressure, there's a very good chance that the blood might fall back to from wherever it is coming. So these valves are present to prevent the backflow of the blood. So they prevent the backflow of blood. Very simple. But because the arteries are carrying it under pressure, so they do not need the the valves.